Somewhere in your home, right now, there's a device that makes fire, and you can work it with one thumb. Take it away. Take away the matches, the gas ring, the lighter in the kitchen drawer, and the pilot light you have never once looked at. Now you're standing on a cold hillside with a pile of damp wood and no way to light it. Almost everybody reaches for the same answer. Rub two sticks together. Try it. Go outside this weekend, pick up two sticks, and rub them together as hard as you can. You will get warm sticks. You will get sore hands. You will not get fire. The people who teach this for a living all say the same thing. A complete beginner, given the right wood, needs days of practice. Given the wrong wood, they will never do it at all, however long they try. And that is the first thing to understand about fire. It is not one invention. It is at least three stacked on top of each other, and every one of them has to work or the whole thing fails. You need a way to make heat. You need something that will catch that heat and turn it into a flame. And you need a way to keep the result alive while you're asleep, or moving, or it is raining. Start with the heat, because that is the part everyone gets wrong. Wood does not catch fire at the temperature you think it does. A piece of dry wood has to reach somewhere around 300 degrees Celsius before it will hold a flame on its own. A spark struck from stone is far hotter than that. It could be 800 degrees. But it is a fragment of burning metal the size of a grain of sand, and it lives for less than a second. 800 degrees for half a second, landing on a log, does absolutely nothing. So the spark is not the invention. The spark is the easy part. The invention is the thing in the middle. A material that a dying spark can set alight, and that will then burn long enough and hot enough to start a real fire. It has a name, tinder. And good tinder is not something you stumble across. It is something you learn, collect, dry, prepare, and carry. The best tinder in Europe is a fungus. Fomes fomentarius, a hard gray bracket that grows on dead birch and beech, shaped like a horse's hoof. You cut out the layer under the cap and beat it flat, and it becomes a soft brown felt that will hold a spark and smolder for hours without ever bursting into flame. We know people did exactly this because one of them was frozen with the kit still on him. In 1991, two hikers in the Ötzi Alps found a body in the ice at 3,200 meters. He had died about 5,300 years ago, and the ice had kept nearly everything. Among his belongings was a small pouch. Inside were pieces of that fungus and lumps of iron pyrite. Pyrite is a brassy yellow mineral, sometimes called fool's gold. Strike it with a flint and it throws sparks. Flint on steel throws sparks too, but there was no steel. Pyrite is what you use in a world before steel. Grains of pyrite were found still stuck to the fungus. That pouch is the oldest complete fire lighting kit anyone has ever found. Striker, sparking stone, and tinder packed together, ready. He was carrying two lumps of a different fungus as well, threaded onto leather straps. And here is the detail that gives the whole thing away. Nothing in that pouch is a lucky find. Every part of it is a particular species, gathered in a particular way, and carried in advance. 5,000 years ago, a man walking up into the high Alps packed his fire the way you pack a phone charger. The Iceman is recent, though. The real question is much older and much harder. When did we start? The trouble is that fire happens without us. Lightning starts fires. Volcanoes start fires. Grass fires sweep across a landscape and burn everything standing on it. Peat can smolder underground for years. Even a heap of bad droppings in a cave can heat up and ignite on its own. So a patch of burnt ground, by itself, proves nothing whatsoever. Archaeologists needed a way to tell our fire apart from the world's fire, and they built one out of small, unglamorous details. Is the burning confined to one small spot, instead of smeared across the whole layer? Is that spot deep inside a cave, where no wildfire and no lightning could ever reach it? Did the heat climb high enough and stay long enough to change the sediment itself, the way an open flame in the same place night after night would? Are there burnt bones in it, and burnt stone tools, sitting next to unburnt ones? And most telling of all, does it happen again in the same place in layer after layer across thousands of years? A wildfire does not come back to the same square meter for 10,000 years. A family does. There is even a way to look at it directly. You cut a block of the cave floor out in one piece, set it in resin, slice it thinner than a sheet of paper, and put it under a microscope. The technique is called micromorphology, and it changed the argument because it examines the ash itself rather than the black stain. Under the microscope, you can see whether ash crystals formed where they lie or blew in from somewhere else. And it will tell you, roughly, how hot the fire got. In 2012, a team led by Francesco Berna published a result from a cave in South Africa called Wonderwerk. Wonderwerk is a long, straight tunnel driven back into a hillside. The material they analyzed came from 30 meters inside it. That distance matters more than anything else in this story. 30 meters in, past the daylight, there is no wind-blown burning debris and there is no lightning. In the sediment, they found ash plant remains and fragments of burnt bone, and the microscopic structure said the burning had happened right there. The layer is about 1 million years old. That is not us. That is Homo erectus. Older claims exist. At Chesawanja and Kubifora in Kenya, patches of baked clay have been dated to around 1.5 million years. But a burning tree stump bakes clay too, and those claims are still being argued over. Wonderwerk is the oldest one that most specialists will stand behind. Then there is Gesher Benot Ya'aqov, a waterlogged site in Israel, excavated by Nama Gornenbar and analyzed in detail by Nira Alper. It is about 780,000 years old. There were no obvious hearths there. The evidence was smaller than that. They mapped every burnt scrap of flint across the site. Tiny chips, the debris of making stone tools. The burnt ones were not spread evenly. They clustered in the same few spots, in level after level. Nobody had dug a fireplace, but something had burned in the same corner of that camp over and over for tens of thousands of years. So fire is 1 million years old. Case closed? No. And this is where the field genuinely splits. In 2011, Roebroeks and Villa went through the European record site by site and asked a narrower question. Not is there any fire, but is there fire everywhere all the time as an ordinary part of being alive? Their answer was that habitual fire use in Europe only appears around 400,000 years ago. Before that, in Europe, there are sites full of people and no fire at all, which produces a genuinely strange picture. Humans walked out of Africa. They reached northern Europe. They lived through winters there. And for hundreds of thousands of years, on this reading, most of them did it without fire as a routine part of the day. Not never, just not reliably. That gap is the crux of the whole subject, and it points straight at a distinction we skated over earlier. Using fire and making fire are not the same skill. If lightning sets a tree alight, you can walk up to it, take a burning branch, carry it home, and feed it. From that moment, you have fire for exactly as long as you never let it go out. That is not a small achievement. Keeping a fire alive through a wet week is real work, and it needs fuel gathered in advance and somebody awake. But it has a hard ceiling. When it dies, you wait for the sky to hand you another one. Making fire on demand removes the ceiling. And the ceiling is precisely what those empty European layers look like. Which brings us to the Neanderthals, who lived in that landscape for a very long time. They plainly use fire. Their hearths are everywhere in the later sites. But could they light one from cold? In 2018, Andrew Sorensen and his colleagues went looking for the answer somewhere nobody had thought to check. They looked at hand axes. On dozens of late Neanderthal hand axes from sites in France, there are small worn patches along one edge, in the same position on tool after tool. The wear is in the wrong place for cutting and the wrong shape for it too. Sorensen reproduced it in the workshop by striking the flint against lumps of pyrite and got the same marks, plus traces of the mineral left behind. If that reading holds, a Neanderthal hand axe was not only a hand axe, it was also the striker. There is other evidence, circumstantial, and some of it is stronger than the wear marks. Neanderthals made glue out of birch bark. To get tar out of birch bark, you have to heat it, starved of air, and hold it in a fairly narrow band of temperature for hours. That is not something you do with a fire you happen to find. And yet the argument is still not settled, because of what comes next, which is the strangest result in this entire subject. If fire is how you survive the cold, then the colder it gets, the more fire you ought to see. In 2017, Denis Sangaith, Harold Dibble, and their colleagues looked hard at 2 Neanderthal caves in southwest France, Roc de Marseille and Pech de l'Ace. These sites have long sequences, running through warm phases and through brutally cold ones. So they counted the fire. In the warm layers, hearths are common. In the coldest layers, fire use falls away. Read that again because it inverts the whole story. The colder it got, the less fire these people made. There is a straightforward explanation, and it is not that they gave up. In a warm, wooded landscape, there is dry wood everywhere, and thunderstorms and natural fires standing around waiting to be borrowed. In a full, glacial landscape, there is very little wood, very little lightning, and almost nothing burning on its own. If you can make fire whenever you want it, none of that should matter very much. If you're mostly harvesting fire from the world, all of it matters enormously. The pattern in those caves looks like people whose fire supply track the weather instead of their intentions. It is not proof that Neanderthals could never strike a spark. Sorensen's hand axes argue the other way. But it does suggest that for a long stretch of human history, fire was not a switch. It was a harvest, and some years the harvest failed, which makes the least glamorous job in the camp the most important one in it. Somebody has to keep it. Across the ethnographic record, people who move carry fire rather than remake it. A smoldering coal wrapped in fungus, packed in moss inside a horn or shell or a clay pot, fed a little air, checked all day long. A slow match will hold an ember for hours if you keep it starved of air and give it straight back the moment you blow on it. Nobody makes a video about this, but this is the actual skill. Starting a fire is a stunt you perform a handful of times in your life. Not letting one die is something somebody in the group does every single day for their entire life and teaches to the next person before they go. The first human being who never had to do that job was alive very recently indeed. And there's one last thing fire bought, which is not warmth and is not cooking. In 2014, the anthropologist Polly Wiesner published something she had been collecting among the Jew/Hoansi of Botswana and Namibia for decades. What people actually talk about. In daylight, conversation is practical and it is about other people. A third of it is complaints, criticism, and gossip. Stories are about 6% of it. At night, around a fire, that inverts completely. 81% of firelit conversation is stories. Fire did not only push back the dark, it manufactured a few hours in which nothing urgent could be done. It put everybody in a circle facing the same light. You are sitting in front of a lit rectangle in the dark right now, listening to somebody tell you a story about people you will never meet. Of everything we have ever done with fire, that is the oldest use we can still measure.